Okay, last one, dude.
Last one. We can do it. Do I have to follow every church teaching? Yes. Will you? No. That's why we have the sacrament of reconciliation.
I'm going to need it after this.
Welcome to Think Like a Jesuit. I'm Father Eric Sundrup, joined today by Paddy Gilger, and we're handling these difficult, challenging topics within the church. Today's topic is, do I have to follow every church teaching?
Well, I don't know about me, but you definitely.
Yeah, me definitely. All right. You'll hear this topic brought up in a lot of spaces. You know, if you're not following one teaching, one doctrine, then you are a heretic, or you're out, or you're not part of
all
this.
or nothing.
All or nothing, right? I think all or nothing is something you hear a lot. And one of the things we got to be cautious with here is, we make the joke, yes, you do have to follow what the church teaches. But we also understand human nature, what's going on. We're not going to be perfect, right? And so one of the things, Think Like a Jesuit, let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good. That comes up in a lot of ways where we talk about church teaching as though these are all sort of like bright line assents, right? Or moments where you have to assent to this particular thing or not.
There's no gray zone.
There's no gray zone, but a lot of the things the church is teaching and a lot of the things the church presents are more like calls, right? Invitations to perfection, to an ideal, right? And an invitation to journey along towards that. You're going to hear a lot of it's this or nothing. If you don't do this, then you're out, right? And we can find that on Twitter, oddly enough. You can have a few tweets that'll show us.
What's that? I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, one of the tweets that we see here is by Owen. He says, "Dissent is too light a term for a rejection of church teaching on sexuality. You are not free to disagree with those teachings without putting your soul in peril."
Got another one here. Oh, hey, quote, "Cafeteria Catholicism is trending again, which means that those of us who are already hanging on to our faith by a thread due to conscientious problems with certain teachings will be told in no uncertain terms that we are unworthy and unwelcome. Fun times." Another one here, "No, you're a heretic," parentheses, "as are 56% of U.S. citizens who identify as Catholic yet say abortion should be legal in most cases. To deny even, all caps, one doctrine of the Catholic Church is to deny the whole."
And then we have this really interesting one, actually. Usually these tweets are so polar, but I like this one actually quite a bit. Thy Geekdom Come, also a great Twitter handle, says, "I'm a Catholic traditionalist in much the same way. Dogma and doctrine don't change, but they develop. What better foundation than 20 centuries of tradition to stand on while reaching toward the heavens and toward the future, unfolding the gospel to every new situation?"
Well, that's capturing that sense of the call, right? The journey.
Yeah. No, I think that's actually a very helpful way for me to look at it. Like, speaking as an American myself, I know I tend to have a certain kind of relationship with the law. Like, the law is this thing that I obey, and if I don't obey it, I'm going to get a ticket. Like, I get pulled over for speeding, or I'm going to be punished and put in jail for not doing so. But I'm not sure that that's actually a very helpful way for us to understand what the law of the church actually is prescribing. So I think it can be much more helpful to think of it in the Roman sense, that these, as you were saying, are almost descriptions of virtues. They're things that we are seeking after or aiming towards. They call us to that kind of holiness or perfection that we're striving towards without demanding that we live up to it or else. It's less
the or else is the dangerous part, I think.
Yeah. I mean, and I think I feel very tempted very often to live in an either or world. Either I'm good or I'm bad. Either I've done it or I haven't done it. I'm a success or I'm a failure. I'm perfect or I'm going to hell. But that's not the world that Jesus tries to help us live in. The church wants to empower that relationship. Instead, as we know very clearly, the church is a both-and church, that we try very much to strive for the teachings the church proposes, knowing that we are going to fail along the way, and that we have a community of people who are going to support us when we fail and help to pull us back up onto the bark of Peter, the raft.
It reminds me, it's been brought up before, I think, every Mass starts with a penitential rite. And I've had a number of people talk to me about, why do we have to start everything with this penitential rite? And I feel like I'm not worthy then. And, I often try to talk through that is, no, it's actually a wonderful opportunity to recognize, and a phrase that Jesuits use a lot, I think it's really important, is loved sinner, right? And loved is the first word in that phrase, right? Loved, that allows us to recognize the sinfulness that's there.
So I think this is one way for us to really understand our relationship with the teachings of the church as these orienting principles that call us to holiness that we do strive to fulfill and live up to, but we don't always make it all the way. There's one other way that we might want to consider what this might mean, is that some people really have thought about the teachings of the church really deeply and are still finding it very difficult to fully assent to these things. They're making some kind of conscientious objection to this. Like, what do we have to say to somebody who finds himself in that kind of a position?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm supposed to answer that now. That was a nice setup.
Thank you.
Someone that comes to you and talks about that, like I'm thinking about that from a pastoral angle. Someone comes to me to talk about, a challenging teaching or something they're having trouble assenting. I usually, and in my mind, I'm channeling my favorite scriptural quote is that, yes, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief, right? I think that's so absolutely honest. So if someone's engaging that, then I'm going to ask them, what are the struggles there? Why can't you bring yourself to assent to that church teaching? And then check and help them to form their conscience well, right? And it's going to get us right into that discussion of a conscience, right? You have to follow your well-formed conscience. The church has got teachings and formation and all these things that are part of that, and you've got to engage that. You can't just say my conscience says this, and so I get to do whatever I want. That's not how that works out. But then really have the long, sometimes difficult, sometimes painful, but I think ultimately very fruitful discussion about what is going on there and why can't you bring yourself here, and where is God working in that. And so if you're in a situation like that, I think finding a trusted person within the church where you can talk honestly about that, where you can feel loved, figure out who those people are, and those are the places you need to engage that conversation. And that also includes prayer, right? And that includes talking to God directly about that. I think those are important places to work with on that, especially when you're struggling with a teaching of the church that's very difficult. I think that the temptation that I would recognize, I think the evil spirit would jump in a lot, is to completely disengage, right? Mm-hmm. Or to cut yourself out, right? Because of one thing. And that's where I really struggle with those tweets where it's all or nothing, and then the people are out of the journey. It cuts off relationship. It cuts off an ability to experience God's love. And to
it cuts off life, because look, like those are things that are said in one particular moment and that are universalized from this one particular moment. But that's not the way life works. Like Jesus, in fact, never gives up on us in life. Like he's always after us in this moment, and now in this moment, and now in this moment, and now in this moment. And when we think of it as this relationship that extends out over time, like our relationship with you and me, with each other, and then also my relationship with the Society of Jesus, with my superiors, as long as they have known with me that I am really doing my best to remain in that relationship and to continue to form my conscience with regard to being a responsible, I hope, member of this institution that we love and hold dear, then there's that enormous sense that time does not stop. Redemption can always take place.
Yeah.
So some of this actually raises an interesting question for us, which in a basic form is just very simple but difficult. Why should we follow what the church teaches? Like, why?
Right.
But here's one way to think about it that's been helpful for me. When we understand the church not just as this abstract structure that's like a set of rules that are going to be punished if I don't obey, but we actually understand it as a community of people that has tried over centuries to pass down a way of living in relationship with one another and with God, it changes the kind of thing we're relating to here. The thing that's teaching us is not just this abstract set, it's not a law book. Instead, no, these are our grandparents and great-grandparents who, through their own struggles with this living, with life, have tried to say, You can belong to this thing, and this is what it means to be a human being in these ways. Try it. Try living in this way. I think that idea of testing living in this fashion is a way to understand an effort to be obedient to the rules of the church.
Yeah, it reminds me of the rules of thinking with the church that Ignatius is talking about. The one that often gets cited is, something that seems to me to be white. If the church is teaching that it's black, I'll follow that assumption, right? It's the trusting that the church is trying to do something good, right? Trusting that the church has good intentions for me, and that I will try to sort out, what is the church trying to do? How is this difficult thing for me possibly a gift, right? A difficult one, a contentious one, a place of tension.
I think thinking of it in this way, too, actually allows us to preserve the absolute freedom and inviolability of conscience at the same time. Because if it is the church who is a mother or a father that is teaching, like a relative to us that is teaching, those mothers and fathers who love us would never coerce our obedience when we have well-formed consciences as adults. That does not happen. But at the same time, they will say, try to live like this. Yeah. What if you considered living this way?
I can hear my mother, trust me. Just trust me. Another thing I think it's important as we talk about these moments of dissent and conscience, right? I think, we have to pay attention to that desire to resolve it and be done with it, right? Yeah. I disagree, and now we don't have to talk about it anymore. And I think that's not how it works. It doesn't work like that in families. It doesn't work like that in the church. We talk about relationship. You're going to remain in that relationship. So you're going to feel that tension and that disagreement. And I think that's an invitation to journey, toward reconciliation, to work within that, to not have it completely resolved, but to not give up either. The church isn't going to give up on you, and you're not going to give up on the church, right? And can you make that promise together?
One of the responsibilities that I think the institutional church holds, that I feel like I hold as a priest, is to, while agreeing with everything you said, trying my best to meet people precisely where they are. Yeah. Without presuming that they agree or disagree with a particular teaching, but just to be right there with them. And I want to do that for myself, just in pure imitation of the way Christ meets me. So he's wherever I am, that's where he wants to be. Now, he doesn't leave me there. He carries me along with him in that relationship of love. But he does not expect me to be already where he is. Instead, he comes closer to me. And that idea of the proximity that Christ wants to have with me, that is the moment of the incarnation, that is just absolutely priceless. And every time that we as the church do not live that out, brother to brother, sister to sister, priest to laity, laity to priest, when we don't live that out, we're really failing to be the pilgrim people of God. We have to do that better. That, for me, is the great hope I have with regard to Pope Francis's call for synodality, where we have a synodal, which means listening together church, where we're talking and listening together in this dialogical fashion. That's the place where we can meet one another where we actually are in our efforts to strive for perfection while realizing that we have not yet met it and probably will not. Please tell me probably.
Probably. Yes, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Yeah. I think that then gets us to the main points that someone that's entering into these discussions of, do I have to believe everything the church teaches, right? There's a lot of things. Don't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. Don't cut off the journey early, right? You're not there yet. Don't end the relationship because you're not there. Also, and those I think tie into this idea of you don't get the tension resolved. If you're going to disagree with the teaching of the church, which has very good reasons for these teachings, and it's a long tradition, and it's a part of a community, don't end the relationship, but you're going to have to journey with that, right? And those are all key components of reconciliation, right? So I think that's one of the things that's really important to pay attention to in these discussions of, do I have to believe everything? How do I work that out? Yeah. If I was summarizing, I'd say don't give up, right? Don't give up, don't cut off relationship. That's important. So when you're looking and thinking like a Jesuit in these discussions of, do I have to believe everything the church teaches? Don't give up.
Yeah.
keep trying and know that it's worth it. The journey is worth it.
My best friends, or the people who are most precious to me in my life, are the very people who carry me along that journey and keep me from doing that. You yourself, one amongst them, so thank you. We also want to thank you for joining us to listen to this difficult, maybe tender conversation about obedience in the life of the church. You can find more about this topic and many others at americamagazine.org. Please like and subscribe to this channel. On behalf of America Media and Father Eric Sundrup, I'm Father Paddy Gilger. Thank you for joining us for Think Like a Jesuit.